first and foremost, is to reform our tax code system. As I have said and continue to say, I think the flat tax is something we go through first and foremost. 10 to 12, maybe 13% of a flat tax. And I think also when you look at our corporations and businesses, we need to cut that 33 to 35% corporate business tax rate in half. We need to flatten that out, bring it down to 16 to 17%. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend a barbecue luncheon with TBC Corporation, which is also the owner of Power Kingdom. We need to bring more corporations and businesses down here to South Florida, where we have all of the intangibles that would allow people to come here. But we must set the conditions. We must set the economic priorities that allow people to bring those jobs and those opportunities back to the United States of America. I do agree. Capital gains taxes should not increase. Dividends taxes should not increase. We don't need to see the marriage tax credit go away or increase or be lessened. We don't need to see the child tax credit cut in half. We don't need to see the estate tax cut back at 55% and maybe even be retroactive. The most important thing that we have to do is start to invest in the American people. Invest with their investment, their ingenuity, their innovation. But coupling with that, we've got to look at all the duplicitous programs we have in Washington, D.C. I don't believe in pork barrel spending and earmarks. I think that has affected so much of having a good and strong financial system and fiscal responsibility in Washington, D.C. I think one of the critical things that you saw was that members of Congress who left Washington, D.C. without giving us any type of predictability or certainty in our economic situation. One of the mandates that the Constitution lays down is that Congress must establish some type of a budget. And we don't have a budget. We have a continuing resolution, which means that people are out here now in a new fiscal year, and they do not know what is going to come for them in the next subsequent months. So those are the types of things that I think are so important for our fiscal responsibility. Japan, when they found themselves in recession, they tried 8 to 9 stimulus packages. They kept themselves in a recession for a decade. Then also you look at this. We have had the longest trend of consecutive months of unemployment being at 9.5% or higher. That means that the stimulus package, which my opponent supported, was supposed to keep unemployment at 8% or lower, has not done it. Another thing we have to look at, we continue to add on to our debt. Our debt now is over $13 trillion. And one of the things that you have to understand, young man, that right now, sitting on your head, you have $45,000 that continues to click away because of the debt that's continued to add. And my opponent voted earlier this year to raise that debt limit by $1.9 trillion. I don't think that that is something where we're talking about the private sector growing. We're not talking about the private sector investment. You look at the statistics that have continually come out, where we have the public sector outpacing the private sector in compensation 2 to 1. We have 9% growth in the public sector. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go up to Washington, D.C. And when you go and look at Washington, D.C., and look at the skyline of that place, you see one same thing that you're not seeing down here. That's construction cranes. If they're growing in Washington, D.C., that means that we're not growing down here. And one of those buildings that they're building up in Washington, D.C. is a new facility for 16,000 IRS agents, which for some odd reason is part of the health care law that my opponent supported.
Well, maybe Mr. West should read the health care law, which I did, because it has something to do with construction cranes for the IRS.
That's a lie.
I think my disagreement with Mr. West is this notion that tax cuts solve every problem. And we think back to the Great Depression, and we're all students of history. We realize that recessions and depressions occur when the private sector is no longer creating jobs for any number of reasons. And today we live in a world economy, and we can talk about the fact that the United States is not creating jobs. We're tied to the European Union, we're tied to Russia, we're tied to China. A lot of things out there that you may or may not want, but it's a reality. So if, in fact, there is a recession, the question is, how do we create new jobs? Well, certainly tax cuts are part of it. But this notion of tax cuts solve every problem and all of a sudden businesses, I've talked to a lot of businesses that say, well, if you give me a couple $1,000, I'm not going to have some big hiring spree. I'm only going to hire when customers come through. And people are willing to buy what I sell. That's the bottom line. That's what I hear over and over again. And that's what we have to do. We have to create the demand. We have to create the confidence in the economy. Part of that is having a stable tax system that is before. It's not 1 year, 2 years. It's permanent. It's understood that it's going to be out there for a long time. Again, businesses, get rid of unnecessary regulations. I work with the marine industry in South Florida. Last year they had this problem with this unnecessary tax in the form of an insurance premium. They were paying the duplicated workers' comp. It doesn't do anything. So I went and fought with others, but we got it done. What the Democrats are going to eliminate. And what does that mean? These businesses now have somewhere between $10,000 and $100,000 of money that they have to pay. It's in their pocket. They can hire somebody. They can buy a piece of equipment. They can expand their business. This is the way you go about it.
All right, thank you. That completes the first round. On to the second round, which consists of 2 questions
from the most strategic ally in the world. It is a democracy in a sea of dictatorships. It is the homeland of the Jewish people. I happen to be an American Jew, and I obviously have my own personal beliefs that I've had since I was born and will continue on way beyond my public service. I had a chance to go to Israel recently and visit with Prime Minister Netanyahu and others, and he appreciates the fact that we are working very hard on these Iran sanctions. Now, he and I and our president also agree that the reality is Iran may not respond to this. But the goal here that all of us had, including Prime Minister Netanyahu in this conversation with our bipartisan Democrat and Republican group, was that we need to engage as many countries as possible against Iran. This should not be Israel's fight alone. This should not be the United States' fight alone. Iran having a nuclear weapon is a threat against the entire world, specifically against Israel, and definitely against the United States as well. I also had the chance in a trip to Israel to go to the northern part of Israel when Hezbollah was firing rockets down on the civilians there. You obviously are in that environment and you're racing for the shelters and you see how these people live day to day. So my commitment, without question, and when I disagree with President Obama like I did on the settlement, I say it publicly and I'll call him on it. When I agree, as I do on the Iran sanctions, I will support and I work on those Iran sanctions to make sure that we're as tight as possible with Ilan Ros-Levi, who's the head of our foreign affairs unit on the Republican side, and with a bipartisan group of Democrats and Republicans. You fight hard, no tolerance for nuclear weapons, no tolerance for Iran supporting Hezbollah or Hamas or any of these other terrorist groups. This is a matter of life and death for Israel and also for our national security.
Mr. West. I had the opportunity to go to Israel last year. I was invited over there for a counterterrorism tour. I spent 9 days going behind the scenes. I also have 43 months of combat zone experience in the Middle East. And I can tell you that there's one thing that they understand in that part of the world, and that is strength and might. Compromise, negotiation, and appeasement is seen as weakness. And that is why we continue to have someone like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad that will come to the United States and poke us in the chest. We must stand and support Israel to make sure that sovereign state can remain a sovereign state. And I think that right now we are not showing the type of resolve and the type of strength that will deter those enemies, deter someone like Iran from continuing to develop that nuclear device. But it's not just deterring Iran, but deterring those who would also seek to support Iran, be it in North Korea, be it in Russia, maybe even China. We know that when Israel had the opportunity to go and strike a nuclear facility in Syria, that they had ties to North Korea. The critical thing is that we are not doing enough to preclude Iran from supporting state-sponsored terrorism all across the world. Being in Hezbollah, who just, I think 2 months ago, we had members of the Lebanese army that fired upon members of the IDF and killed them. Also, the money that is going into the Gaza Strip. We have got to start tightening up on that regime, a regime that is led by theocrats. And those theocrats have one thing they understand. It's the return of this person called the hidden imam, the Mahdi, the 12th imam. And that has to come by an apocalyptic event. If we think that the such thing as we have with the mutual assured destruction principle with the Soviet Union is going to work with Iran, we are not being sensible. I do not want to see another Chernobyl moment happen on my watch. I also understand this, that our military is stretched thin. The operations in Iraq, the operations in Afghanistan, when you have these extended 9-year operations where you're getting involved in more occupation-style warfare and nation building, that does drain your resources. Ladies and gentlemen, we must understand one simple thing. I spent 2.5 years in southern Afghanistan in Kandahar. Iran is actively participating in operations against our soldiers, being it in Iraq or being it in Afghanistan. And if we do not come to a time when we understand that we're going to have to support some type of hard action against that regime, then we are going to find ourselves in a position where we will have to react and not be proactive and taking away a capability that will bring death and destruction to Israel and also to the greater world. A very interesting thing that was found out just recently. There are direct flights between Tehran and Caracas, Venezuela, passenger airline flights. Except one thing, there are no one flying on those flights, according to some of the passenger manifests that have been recovered. This is a critical point. It's a critical decision we have to make.